Welcome to the final edition of Avalon's Celebrating Recovery Speaker Series. Today is a very special day because not only are we celebrating the recovery journey of our Avalon co-founder, Helen Burnham, but it is also Avalon's 30th birthday today. Welcome, Helen, and thank you for being here to celebrate with us.
It is my pleasure.
Can you tell me about what life was like before you started your recovery journey?
Yes, I can. It's funny. I was talking to my husband this morning, and I said what the question was, and he said it was mayhem. And my words were, it was utter chaos. We had a couple of years of one disaster after another. Our house burnt down. It was arson. My son, Danny, who had just celebrated his 25th birthday, he died in a tragic accident directly related to drugs and alcohol. And I'd gone through a divorce. So thinking about all those things, I felt justified in drinking, and I did. I mean, who wouldn't drink? That's a lot of stuff to deal with. And so I worked really hard at avoiding all the feelings that come with all those things that have been happening in my life over the last few years.
Can you share a bit about your recovery journey?
It's interesting. It really was Danny's death that started me on my journey of recovery, or coming to terms with believing or accepting that I was an alcoholic. After Danny died, in those days, like that was 34 years ago, and in those days there wasn't a lot of help for counseling for grief or anything like that. And because I was drinking and my family was drinking, we just stuffed all our feelings with more alcohol. And our family, I could feel, was falling apart. Like I had better step back a bit. My whole life, I was a product of the 50s. I was a woman who wanted to have a big family, a big happy family. And I went right into that. I was only 19. I quit university. I wanted to get married. I had a baby, and then they had another baby, and I ended up having 7 children. And I had a big family, but it wasn't a happy family. But I managed to cope. I kept my appearances up. In those days, appearances were really important. So I did a really good job of that. We went to church, and we were in the front row, and I had these 7 kids all dressed nicely and looking like the ideal family, but inside it was not ideal. My husband and the father of all my children was emotionally abusive and sometimes physically abusive. But in those days, we weren't as open about those kind of things. It was before Oprah, when people were, discovering all these things were happening, and were starting to deal with them in a more open way. But in those days, I was working on keeping up the appearances and did a good job for a long time. But meanwhile, inside, I think I was dying. So as time went on, I finally ended that relationship. I couldn't stay in it. And after almost 20 years. And of course, once I got out of that relationship, I think I had such a sense of failure. My drinking escalated. I didn't start drinking because growing up, and I grew up in a very strict Christian church where you weren't allowed to smoke, drink, play cards, smoke, drink, or play cards. I forget what the other, couldn't dance. And so I always felt left out in a lot of things. And of course, I made up for all those things, particularly drinking. So when I realized that I had the freedom to drink as much as I could after my marriage failed, and I had such a terrible feeling of failure that I ended up, my drinking escalated to the point where when Danny died, all we did was drink more to stuff our feelings. But our family, we didn't cope with the feelings that were happening apart from drinking. And so I wanted to get help from my family. And I thought, I'll go to a counselor. And having the ego that I had, I went to the counselor with this list of things that I thought were wrong with the family. And maybe I drink too much, but that wasn't a big deal. But of course, she was very wise and didn't tell me I was an alcoholic, but she said, you might want to look at your drinking. So I did. And so I went to see her in October, and it took me until January of the next year to finally break through all the denial and shame and accept that I was an alcoholic. And it's an interesting thing, because I thought, like, when I stopped drinking, it was going to be the end of my life. Life was going to be boring. I couldn't imagine doing things without the alcohol. And in fact, it was really the beginning of the best part of my life. And I'm so grateful that I did find recovery and start this journey of discovering myself and healing for myself and then my family too. And an interesting thing, like when we're in recovery, we have to learn to cope with life on life's terms, and it's not always easy, but there are ways of doing that. And by following your heart and really being willing to look at myself, I was able to work through a lot of the issues that were wanting me to drink and stuff my feelings. So I think that, like, when you end up in recovery, life still goes on. It's a lot better than it was, but things still happen, and we have to learn to, live life on life's terms. And the sad thing in our family is, even though that we were a healing family, and some of my family members have found recovery for themselves one way or another, I did have another son who died tragically, maybe about, I start to lose track of that, but it was probably about 10 or 12 years ago. And the difference was that when David died, he tried so hard to get sober, and he had 8 years, which was a big gift. But when he passed away, our family was able to remember him and mourn his passing and not stuff our feelings around it, and just we're able to embrace the sadness and talk about him and be grateful for the years that he did have. So and part of my journey too was when I first got sober, I was reading Betty Ford's book, A Glad Awakening, and I just had a vision then of wanting to do anything I could to help women find recovery. Because I think for women, the shame and the stigma is pretty big. And I just thought, I'll do anything I can, if I can, to help women find recovery. And then I met another woman in recovery, Virginia, and we started talking, and that's how we started Avalon. And of course, we started off having grandiose ideas. We were going to have a Betty Ford North, and Virginia had been to treatment, and we thought this would be great. And as it turned out, I think the universe or God or our higher power had another plan, which was really much better, more feasible. And as the board, as the years went by, and the board saw that all the doors kept closing on starting a treatment center, but this drop-in center turned out to be such a totally unique idea. We thought of having the drop-in center to initially have women network before and after they went to treatment, which they can still do if they want to. But having a drop-in center where women can come with no charge, no appointments necessary, no waiting time. Because, when a person's starting to come to terms with their addiction, the window of opportunity is often very small. And so if you have to go on a waiting list, sometimes your denial will go up, or you'll end up, you won't find recovery. Whereas Avalon, you can just pop in anytime you want. And now we can virtually pop in. So that's pretty much my story of my recovery.
Helen, you've walked through a lot of loss and adversity, but also have received some amazing gifts in your recovery journey. And I'm wondering if you can share with us what the best thing is that you've gotten out of recovery.
I think like the sense of hope and joy, like it's so different than the flashes that you get from, you know, your rush of doing some sort of alcohol or drugs. There's something about the deep joy that comes from getting to know myself and just, I think, like feeling more comfortable with myself and accepting myself, and just, it's just, I don't know the words to describe it except for a deep, abiding joy.
That's beautiful. Thank you. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would that be?
I think that I would say, open your heart and embrace that little person inside yourself and listen to her intuition and not be afraid to act on it.
That's wonderful. Thank you. And looking back, as it's the 30-year anniversary since Avalon started, what are you most proud of?
I just, sometimes it's beyond my wildest dreams what's happened, and especially lately, like with the COVID, how now all of a sudden all this all these virtual meetings are happening. We're reaching people all over. So I think what I'm most proud of is the fact that it really has, I've realized that dream of helping women find recovery, and over and over and over, I've heard women say, thank you, because you saved my life. And it isn't really me. I've just been a channel, but it's so gratifying and fulfilling. I can't say enough about it.
Well, thank you, Helen, and thank you to you and Virginia for starting Avalon and having that vision and sharing it with all of us and all of the women that it has touched and the families that it has touched. And thank you so much for sharing and allowing us to celebrate your recovery with you. Thank you for helping so many other women find recovery over the last 3 decades.
Oh, thank you.